So I was thinking, do we choose to incarnate into this world, into this life, onto this planet, into this dimension? Do we choose? Is it a voluntary choice? And do we know beforehand what potentially we might be getting involved in? The struggle that this life is about, the challenge that this life is about, the opportunity that this life is about, the vulnerability that this life is about, the unfairness in a way that this life is about. Like, I was watching this thing on Vice, Vice channel on YouTube, and it was about sugar and slavery and how these 12 million Africans were taken as slaves to work, I'm not sure where it was, on the sugar fields. And their labor, it was labor intensive, like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. They often just died where they worked. They were malnourished, starving, the heat, just the gruelingness of the labor. And I mean, we've heard about these things. I mean, when people built certain roads and died while building it, slaves and whatever it is in the freezing cold or something. And you think to yourself, why would a soul want to come into this dimension and and face this kind of reality and deal with it and have this very, very far out experience? Like, why? It just doesn't seem right. And can argue from from that perspective, from the soul perspective, where it's more just, I feel, bliss or love or goodness, or just, when how can we relate to it? And that would be maybe moments where we've just had like just a brilliant day, where things just have really gone our way. We've spent time with our loved ones. We just feel accomplished. We spend time in nature. We've I don't know, we're healthy, just for that moment. And there's just a moment of just sort of peace, a moment of just gratefulness, gratitude, appreciation, fulfillment, like purpose, meaning. And it's very brief. And they happen more and more, or less frequently, I would say, in today's world. But those moments, I don't know, or you're just sitting on the beach and it's just, a very, very peaceful, connected time, and it's just something beautiful or something or other. You've been moved to tears in the most joyful way. And then in that moment, you can say life feels good, life is good, And from that perspective, it's like, but hold it a minute, you somewhat almost disengaged from all the suffering, from all the trauma, from all the pain, from all the unfairness, from all the hand sanitizing and mask wearing and, potential being injected with poisons by mandatory law, and having to deal with like generally narcissistic governments and whatever it might be, and the matrix world, and you have those breakout moments, right, where it just feels all good. It all feels, it all makes sense, but there's just a sense of allowance, surrendering, and just being, right, and true being in that way. And it's momentarily, because there's so much work that hasn't been done. There's still more, but what I'm saying is that from that perspective, from that energy space, right, from that moment that you're holding, I think that's maybe where we hold before we come down into this incarnation, and we look, because that's what we are of sensing before we come into the body, before we come into a lot of, to deal with the mind and the duality of things. And this world, which is more as people with past life experiences, near-death experiences, near-death experiences who have gone over to the other side will say that on when you pass on, that world feels more real, that this world is more cartoonish, right? And you feel more emotions deeply and whatever it is, and just it's so much more real, and such more. So what I'm saying is that from that point of view, we kind of say, okay, it's like maybe when you're standing outside of, on the edge of the pool, and it's a bit cold, but you're kind of hot, and and you're comfortable, whatever it is, not too over hot, but you're comfortable, and then you dive into the water and it's like freezing cold, and you're like, whoo, you get a shock, even though it was cold, it was still a shock, to jump in and have that surprise, you know, and be met with that reality. It was like, yo, I just didn't anticipate that. So it's like maybe we couldn't really anticipate this reality moving into it because we from that state. Just like we have moments here in this reality where we just feel that sense of joy or bliss or connectedness or hope or faith or whatever, just being alive, right? The beauty of being alive. And again, it's very, very few moments, and maybe more for others, more moments that appear for others and for some and whatever it is. But this life is grueling. It's absolutely grueling. There's no question about it, and it's supposed to be grueling, right? It's supposed to be completely contrasted from that of the afterlife, if you want to call it, and the real life, in a way, this is more just a simulation, if you will, for the soul's growth, right? For the soul's evolution. And that's why I think we do incarnate. I think also the soul is hungry, to grow and to learn. And it's like when we get hungry, physically hungry in these bodies now, well, you haven't eaten for several hours or whatever it is, you get hungry, or maybe a day or two that you haven't eaten, and you crave food. Your being is unsettled. You can't, it's uncomfortable, right? And you're having to eat, you have to eat. And so like with the soul, when the soul, moves on from this dimension into the afterlife, okay, that the soul becomes hungry for growth, and therefore its desire to incarnate, right? Not necessarily against its will, but it's almost need, because it feels hungry, it feels unfulfilled, right? And it needs that fulfillment. So it comes down into this planet, into this dimension. It chooses of its own choice, in a way, not because, well, in previous lives you behaved like a tyrant, you hurt people, you stole, you didn't fulfill your soul's mission, you turned over to the dark side, you lost yourself, you became intoxicated with materialism, ego, whatever it is, status, you hurt animals, you hurt others, you hurt yourself, right? You became just a really unsavory character, right? A great sinner, and you moved away from your soul, and therefore you have to go back, and you're going to go back as somebody who is a slave on a sugarcane farm, and that is your plight. That is that is how you will serve in your wrongdoing, and you'll correct it in a way, and you'll balance out the scales. You see, I don't think it comes from a sort of, well, you have to, right? I don't think it needs to, because I don't think it's force in that way, right? I just think, like, well, you sort of are, I don't know what, contracted, maybe you signed a contract, and therefore you have to abide by it, by getting your soul, you have to pay off your karmic points at some stage or another, and whatever that means. And like, let's say if you ever saw the movie Bee Movie, I think it was, where Jerry Seinfeld, who plays the bee, they step up for their first day at work. Him and his friend Matthew Broderick is the other voice of the other bee. I can't remember their names. And it's like, there's a whole selection board of what you can choose to be, type of thing. And a worker bee, a soldier bee, or whatever kind of bee, well, depending, something like that. And so that's your choices, and step up to the plate, and now you have to do it. So like with incarnation, before you come into this life, it's like, well, you can play a role as a black African or an Asian, or, to this family, or you can be born with this disability, or you can be born to an alcoholic mother, whatever it is, type of thing. And these are the slots that are needing to be filled, and you will fill them. I don't think it works that way. I think it's done in kindness. It's done with, okay, well, let's see on the soul level where you are holding, where you are at, where you are needed at the same time as well, like where you are needed in the world. It's not just up to you, right? You also have a job to fulfill and a service, but like, you're being employed, if you will. But that choice of the job is primarily your own, right? It's not forced upon you. And so, comes this noise. I don't know what this noise is, but I'll end off soon. I don't know what the noise is. I don't know if you can hear it. It comes and it goes. I'm in a cottage in Johannesburg that I'm a bed in Airbnb, if you want to call it. I don't know what that noise is, and I waited for it to stop before I did this recording, and hopefully I thought it wouldn't come back, but anyways, it's back, baby. So that's my feeling, is that the soul hungers, right, for growth, right, to become closer to its fulfillment, and closer to God, closer to its truth, closer to fulfill more of its potential. And so it comes into this world out of a sense of hunger and need and restlessness, And I also think that what happens is that the soul carries the wounded psyche, if you will, right? The wounds of this life. And therefore, now this is something else, I suppose, that I was also thinking about, but we don't come in with a clean slate. We come in with baggage, right? We come in with trauma, previous trauma, I really feel. We come in with, people that you just by nature, just by who you are, I don't know, maybe very aggressive, very angry, right? Highly competitive, certain characteristic traits. Yes, there are, supported or imprinted upon by your environment, by your culture, and whatever. There's no question about that. But you come in with certain karmic debt, and I think that's the psyche, and I think that's the wounds of the psyche that are there, that happens from lifetime to lifetime, that also need to be going into and healed, and healed. So I don't think that we just go over to the next world with and laugh after it, and then we come back in with a clean slate. I think there are wounds. I think there are phobias. I think there are, but whatever it is that lie deep within the psyche, right? So the psyche is almost like a dimension of the soul, if you will, and carries the psyche. But I don't think like ego is carried a lot. A lot of things aren't carried, I would say. But I think your essence is carried. And what is your essence? That's a whole nother talk, I suppose. But anyway, so now one of the things as well is that also before we incarnate in this world, we realize before we incarnate, before we birth into this world, we look down, let's just say get down as a whatever it is, into this play. And from that perspective, it's a very short, it looks very short, I feel. It's very like over in a blink of an eye. So it doesn't look that sort of intense from that timeline, right? Because time is potentially different. Now, I don't know these things at all, but it's like, I just feel that it's, from that perspective, we don't, even though we've probably lived so many lifetimes, but as soon as we go back to that life after death, we don't realize the feeling of how long that actually felt, right? How intense that really was, right? Even like a psychedelic, you take a psychedelic and sometimes it feels like it was for years. Like you take DMT, and it feels like you tripped for 3 days, but it was for 15 seconds or something like that, or whatever it was, or 3 hours, but it was 15 seconds. You lose track of time, but it's over in a blink of an eye. But so much does happen, and so you can't anticipate when you take the DMT, into the DMT realms, that how much you're going to experience, how long it's going to feel, the duration of it. It's like just you wing it, you don't know. But even though you've done it before, when you're in it, you lose dimension, you lose boundaries, you lose time, you lose perspective, you lose so much, in a way, it all dissolves. And so what I'm saying is that, like, even though this world, we know the pain that we felt, like how exhausting it is, I'm saying once we pass on from this life, you feel refreshed and you feel like, well, let's do it again. Okay, it doesn't seem as sort of devastating to try and do it again from that perspective. Like from here, this perspective now, to say, guys, folks, whatever, let's do this again. You'll be like, hell no, no ways. Maybe I can rest for like 10,000 years or something like that, and then if I get bored enough or something, no, is that boredom? But it's like, no, I can't, it's just too much. But you know how it is sometimes when you've been refreshed on something and you've forgotten a lot of it, right? And you've lost touch with a lot of it, that you can, do things again. Like even for ourselves, when we make mistakes of like, um, uh, I don't know, sometimes maybe like with a friend, that you just that you don't want to be friends with anymore, and you don't like their character and their personality, and they're manipulative and whatever it is, and then years later, or even a family member, and years later you see them again and you've forgotten who they are, and you'd be like, yo, let's be friends again, or let's get close again, and you forget, and and now you wanting to get to know them again, and then not even if they've changed. I don't know. That's maybe not the best example, but like, we refreshed in certain ways, and we forget. We forget how certain things, like with alcohol, right? A hangover. I mean, we feel the hangover, we really do. But then the next week we're drinking again just to have another hangover, and it's like, or we forget pain. A lot of the time we forget how things felt. I mean, I don't know, you've cut yourself, you broke your ankle. I mean, I had kidney stones. I've forgotten the pain, right? I know it was severe, but I've forgotten it, okay? I think emotional pain is different in a way, but I think even once you've healed the emotional pain, you forget how it felt, right? You forget how it felt to be in an abusive relationship, like you forget a lot of things. And so we forget often, all flows. Pontus Reis, all flows. Your memory flows, your experiences flows, your ups, your flows, your times of slavery incarnations flows. It all changes, it all dissolves, it all fades, it all moves on, it all moves on. There's always this moving on. So it's hard to hold on to certain experiences and memories and things like that, It all flows. Your orgasms flow, your bliss flows, your suffering flows. It all changes. And so we're in this absolute flux of change all the time. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying, is that I also think that I'd like to think that if you come here and you suffer tremendously, like, you become a sugarcane, slave to work on the sugarcane fields, and you die of hunger and whatever, like I'm just saying, like I think in a way that I don't want to say that almost the suffering grows the soul, but I think almost it's kind of how, to a certain degree, I mean, I wouldn't say that completely, but what is the point of that kind of suffering? What is the point of that kind of suffering? What, like I'm saying in a metaphysical, spiritual, what is the benefit of it? What is the value to it? Because it has to have a value. It has to have, a meaning to it. It has to have a significance to it. And what is it? And on the one hand, I would like to say, well, if you do suffer in this world, that your soul is cleansed to a large degree, purified of other past lives, wrongdoings or something like that. There is that aspect almost to a degree. Or maybe just because you suffered so much, you were removed so much away from the blissfulness, from the godliness, from the pure beingness. I'm just saying of the, being close to God in the afterlife, and you came into this world, that you had such an abstract, removed experience that coming back to it, coming back to the source, is just healing for the soul. So you had to have the opposite. You had to have the duality, right? You had to have, it's like just that, like if you've gone without food for days, and then you eat again, it's like, oh my word, this potato is just so delicious. This banana is so sweet. If you haven't seen the sun for like a month because it's been overcast and cloudy or snow, finally comes out, you're like, oh my word, the beauty of the sun, the intensity of the sun, the gorgeousness of the sun. Like, you can't believe it. And so maybe in that contrast, you have that kind of experience. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying and justify suffering from that point of view, because it just seems... And I also think to a certain degree, depending on the person's level of consciousness, do they suffer? I don't think suffering is the same for everybody, right? I don't think it's the same. If you take a sensitive soul, right? and there's a sensitive person, and you expose them to certain horrors and traumas, right? They will be deeply traumatized, more so than somebody who's more narcissistic or indifferent or, self-involved, or just doesn't feel things. Like, you get people who go to war and kill other people and they're fine with it. And then you get more of the sensitive people that are traumatized by it. So depending on your level of sensitivity and consciousness, I mean, for a sensitive, conscious individual, they can't hurt animals, right? Because it hurts them to hurt an animal. But unconscious, traumatized people, mentally disabled people who are removed from themselves, who are in such pain, can hurt other animals and actually get pain from it. Get pleasure from causing them pain. A conscious, sensitive individual cannot rape somebody else. They can't do it because they're too sensitive to the pain that they're causing somebody else. And there's no desire to hurt anybody else, because you also feel they're hurt, And so sensitive people, higher consciousness people, really, really struggle with the smallest of things, with the smallest of injustices, right? With the smallest of evils or something like that. But for the unconscious individual who knows no better, does not really suffer in a massive way. So we've got to put it into perspective. We've got to understand. A sensitive person, a conscious individual, knows that there's more to this. They don't just accept the reality of which they've been presented with. Like for most people do not know any better. They don't know that, life doesn't have to be about living in a drunken village, and that's normal. When I used to visit my friend Tabo in the village, and the adults were mostly drunk and the teenagers were drunk, and terrible things were going on. For the children, for them, that's like, okay, even when you grow up, it's like normal. Say, no, that's not normal. The Matrix is not normal, folks. CV's story, what's all going on is not normal. But people think it's normal. This is the new normal. People think it's normal. It's not normal. Because they can't think out of the box. They can't imagine. They can't assume. They can't do these things. And so that's another thing, is they don't really suffer in that way because they don't know that there's an alternative. They just accept of what it is, and it's like, oh, well, this is my plight, this is my role, this is the suffering, this is the inevitability of things, and whatever it is. And they don't have a conscience. They don't understand it. They don't even have an existential angst about it. So that's also something to think about. All right, folks, I've got to get going. Much more to be said on all of this, but we'll leave it for that for now. Take care.